Welcome to Math with B. Today, we're going to learn how to find the least common denominator. You need to find the least common denominator when you are either adding or subtracting fractions. It's easy to remember the denominator is on the bottom of the fraction because both denominator and down begin with D. Let's look at some fractions. Our first fraction is 2/3. Which number is down? That's right, the 3. The 3 is the denominator in this fraction. Let's look at 8/9. Which number is down? That's right, the 9. The 9 is the denominator in this fraction. Now let's look at finding the least common denominator. When we look at least common denominator, we are trying to find denominators that are the smallest or least that these fractions have in common, or that are the same. We find least common denominator because smaller numbers are typically easier to work with in math. To find least common denominator, we're going to start with the larger denominator, which in this case is 3. We find multiples of 3 until we find one that is also a multiple of 2. To find multiples, we multiply by 1 first. 3 times 1 equals 3. Can you think of a whole number that you multiply 2 by to get to 3? No, neither can I. So let's move on. The next multiple is 3 times 2. 3 times 2 equals 6. Can you think of a whole number we multiply 2 by to get to 6? That's it, 3. 3 times 2 equals 6. So 6 is going to be our common denominator. We'll look at finding the numerators later. As we saw in the previous example, finding the least common denominator is the same as finding the least common multiple for the denominators. In this example, we have 2/3 and 1/5. To find the least common denominator, we start with the larger denominator, which is 5. First, we multiply 5 times 1, which equals 5. There's no whole number we can multiply 3 by to get 5, so we go on to 5 times 2, which equals 10. There is also no whole number we can multiply 3 by to get to 10, so we move on to 5 times 3, which equals 15. There is a whole number we can multiply 3 by to get to 15, 5. 3 times 5 equals 15, so 15 will be our common denominator for these two fractions. Now let's try some on your own. Find the least common denominator for each pair of fractions. The answers are at the bottom. Pause this video now so that you can complete these by yourself. Once you have a common denominator, you need to determine what the numerators will be. For these two fractions, our larger denominator is 5. We find multiples of 5 until we find one that's also a multiple of 2. 5 times 1 is 5, which is not a multiple of 2. 5 times 2 is 10, which is a multiple of 2 because 2 times 5 equals 10. Our common denominator here is 10. Once we have our common denominator, we need to determine what our numerator will be. So we look at what number did we multiply our denominator by to get our common denominator. Here, you multiply 5 times 2 to get 10. So we also have to multiply the numerator by the same number. 2 times 2 equals 4. On our top fraction, what do we multiply 2 by to get to 10? That's right, 5. 2 times 5 equals 10. So we have to multiply the 1 by the same number. And 1 times 5 equals 5. Now that we have fractions with the same denominator, we can either add or subtract. In this instance, we're going to subtract. Our denominator is going to stay the same. We subtract the numerators. 5 minus 4 equals 1. Our answer is 1/10. Here's another example. 1/8 plus 1/6. To find our common denominator, we start with the larger denominator, We find multiples of it until we find one that is also a multiple of 6. 8 times 1 is 8. That is not a multiple of 6. 8 times 2 is 16. That is also not a multiple of 6. 8 times 3 equals 24. That is a multiple of 6 because 6 times 4 equals 24. So our common denominator here is going to be 24. Now we have to find our numerators. We look at what we multiplied our denominator by to get our common denominator, and in this instance, we multiply by 3. 8 times 3 equals 24. So we multiply the numerator by the same number, 1/8 equals 3/24. For this fraction, 6 times 4 equals 24. So we multiply the numerator by the same number. 1 times 4 equals 4. Now that we have common denominator, we can add our fractions. Our denominator will stay the same. 3 plus 4 equals 7. Our answer is 7/24. Now let's try some on your own. Add or subtract the fractions. The answers are at the bottom. Pause this video now so that you can complete these by yourself. Now, let's recap what we learned today. To add and subtract fractions with different denominators, we need to convert the fractions to ones with a common denominator. To do this, first identify the larger denominator. Find the first multiple of this larger denominator that is also a multiple of the smaller denominator. This least common multiple is also the least common denominator. Convert each fraction to one with the least common denominator by multiplying the numerator by the same number you multiplied the denominator by. And last, add or subtract the numerators of the fractions. This completes our lesson on least common denominator. Thank you for tuning in to Math with B.